Later on this morning, I'm going to be taking the funeral service for a good friend of mine who died suddenly 3 weeks ago today. His wife, Julie, has asked for the funeral that we sing, or we listen to rather than sing, the hymn, "We Have a Gospel to Proclaim." She said that Philip used to play that hymn at every available opportunity. He was a licensed reader in the Church of England, and he would often lead services, and often that was the hymn he would choose. And so in some ways this is a bit indulgent, because as part of a tribute to him, I'm going to share that hymn with you today. We have a gospel to proclaim, and it talks about the good news of the gospel. It says proclaim it throughout the earth. It's good news. I wonder whether you proclaim the good news. What is the good news of the gospel? And the hymn proceeds to tell us, it tells us of Jesus' birth, his life on earth, that assurance, that good news that he became one of us, that God knows what it is to be human, that God dwelt among us, and now, of course, lives within us. It tells of his death. You might say, well, why is that good news? But that's good news in the sense that it means that Jesus knew and knows what it is to know pain and suffering and grief. And yet out of that death, it tells of his resurrection, that life always comes out of death. And it tells of how after he'd risen from the dead, Jesus ascended and he left us with the gift of his Spirit, that assurance that God continues to dwell within us always. And it ends, that last verse, talking about telling of him as King, that promise that God is King, and that while his kingdom here on earth isn't yet here in all its fullness, we can catch glimpses of it now. And one day we will know it in all its fullness, when one day there really will be no more death or suffering or pain. We have a gospel to proclaim. Do you proclaim it in these days of COVID, when so many people are struggling and are talking about how much they're in despair? Are you able to proclaim a hope because of the gospel that you know? I pray that you can. I know that Philip did that day in and day out. We're going to listen now to that hymn, "We Have a Gospel to Proclaim."